All right, guys, what's up? What's up? It's Hayden, Schaap here. I'm in Ecuador. Just got to Ecuador, a long day of traveling today. And I did not come prepared with a mic. So I apologize if the audio is bad, but I wanted to and if I'm talking soft the whole time. But I definitely wanted to just continue my study because I don't know, I'm obsessed with what I'm learning in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People right now. So on my channel, I talk about everything related to truth-centric persuasion and influence, personal and character development, and leadership. So everything that revolves around like how to do those things based off of true paradigms and true principles, which you'll know what I'm talking about if you listen to my stuff. But what I decided to do was Covey, as I was reading through 7 Habits of Highly Effective People for the who knows how manyth time, since I've been doing it with our leadership training for our company since I became a team leader 7 years ago. And it has been the single most impactful thing that I've done for my not only work and career life, but for my life outside of career. It's brought more meaning and impact than very, very few things have brought more meaning and impact than the concepts of this book, Views of Truth. And so what I decided to do, because Covey says you should teach, or you should study with the intent to teach. And I had this inkling of thought, this impulse of thought that was like, you should make your study public. Because one, makes me feel really uncomfortable. I really dislike the idea of having something produced out into the world that is not like, I haven't spent time and effort and energy on in terms of like the production quality, right? So that would, if I were to do it in one take, it would like force me to really truly have to like pay attention in this study, because I wouldn't be able to make it like super highly produced. And so that made me really uncomfortable, which is what made me want to do it even more. But then secondly, just that concept of being able to ingrain these principles, mostly the ones about truth-centered individual character development and leadership, ingrain those more deeply within me to become a better version of myself. And thirdly, to show you guys listening, you leaders and you sales reps that work with me, that I am putting my money where my mouth is, and my time. I'm putting my time and my energy where my mouth is, and that I'm asking you guys to go read this stuff and apply it in your lives and become the type of people who embody, or who seek to embody, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, who seek to live a life based off of truth-centered leadership. And so I'm trying to show that I am attempting honestly to do the same, and it's just having a massive impact on my life. Okay, so let's get into our study today. Even though I'm traveling, I was thinking like, man, if I could do a few extra episodes and then release them, schedule them out, maybe that's the play. But honestly, I really, as much as I can, we're on a service trip for our company in Ecuador, and we're going to go do 2 days of service and spend time in the Galapagos Islands after this. And I'm like, it's as cool as that is. I've like been craving getting on my computer today and doing the study, and like I just love it. So I want to keep it up. Here we go. We're going to get into identifying your center. Okay. Now, why this is important is because we've been talking about living a principle-centered life. First off, you have to identify how to become proactive. How can you become the creator of your life? Then from there, you say, okay, what maps am I using to navigate the world? Am I trying to use a freeway roadmap of Los Angeles to get through the Rocky Mountains, right? Because if I am, that's kind of frustrating. So like, what mental, psychological maps am I using to navigate the world? And those maps are things that have been given to us from our parents. They've been passed down genetically. They have been learned within us based on our responses to situations. So like, we have to own the fact that our paradigms, the way we see the world, is a result of the choices that we've made in response to stimuli. Be that the consequences of our own habits and past behavior, be that the reaction to bad circumstances, be that how we were raised, or the social mirror, essentially. So once we realize that we're actually in control of what our life can become, that we can be the creator, that we are actually the creator of that. It's not just that we can be. Maybe that's an insight for you. Is like, it's not just proactivity is not just that we can be the creator of our lives. It's recognizing that we already are. And so what you have to do is make your creation of your life become conscious in a way where you are now living according to the principles that matter most. It's not just about going and making a ton of money. It's about identifying how much money do I need to make in order to have the impact that I want. It's not just about going and saying like, I can have I can build the mansion that I want. And I can have my dreams. It's about saying, what if I could actually dream up a world that doesn't exist in which I can leave a legacy and I can love more fully and I can be the type of person who becomes the embodiment of service-oriented whatever you choose, right? So then, habit 2, begin with the end in mind, is the first creation of that life. It's taking those impulses of thought of what could my life be now that I want it to be based off of things that are unchanging and true, and now that I want to have impact and leave a legacy, and I want to love more fully, and I want to live and thrive. What kind of life could I have? And it's about taking those things and building a first creation for that life. And so then Covey's argument, what we've been studying the last couple, and I think this summary is super important to tie it together, is Covey's argument is, from what I have been learning and understanding, not only over the last 8 years or 7 to 8 years, but specifically this time around, Covey's argument is, in order for us to go now write the script or write the program, because we are the programmer according to habit 1, be proactive. Now we're going to write the program. In order to write the program, you have to identify, 1, what is a center and why do we make decisions? Why are all the decisions that we make flowing out of what our center is? What does that mean? And then saying, okay, what's a truth center? What does it mean to have security in my life? What does it mean to have guidance in my life? What does it mean to have wisdom in my life? And what does it mean to have the power to do whatever I need to do, flowing out of living a life based off of truth? What does that mean? And then you say, okay, well, what are all the alternative centers that are not truth-based, that are seemingly good but actually bad? Family-centeredness, self-centeredness, money-centeredness, friend-centeredness, pleasure-centeredness, all this stuff. That's what we talked about last time. After that, now it's about saying, okay, where do I fall on this spectrum of centeredness? What are my centers? Because we are all living a life according to center. Some center. It's just about what center it is, right? As a very close mentor of mine and dear friend has once said, I'll let you in on a little secret. He said one time, you're always putting first things first. I'll let you in on a little secret. And now this is my interpretation of that for habit 2, because he was referring to habit 3. I'll let you in on a little secret, and that's this. Your life does have a center. And if you don't understand what that center is, beware, because it's not the things on the top of the ocean that kill you. As every seafaring captain knows, it's the things that lie underneath that are unseen. So the unseen things in our lives are the things that actually poison us the most. It's the death by 1,000 cuts that kills us, not the one fell swoop. So what I mean by that is, like, you have to become aware of your center, or else you run the risk, and you probably are not living according to a principle center, unless your parents were, or unless you have the circumstance of living according to a principle center based off of all the variables that would just happen to have to align. But even if you're not conscious of it, then you must become conscious of it in order to build off of it. So now we're going to talk about identifying what is your center. What is the thing that I derive all of my security, my wisdom, my security, my guidance in life? So what is the thing that I care about most in my life, that I derive my sense of protection and my identity from, that I derive my guidance and how I make decisions, that I derive the wisdom of how I view the variables and how they work together, and then decisions based off of those, and the power, the strength to make my decisions. What is that for me? Yeah, I have to identify that. I have one, but I don't know if it's good. That's the premise. So now we're going to look here, identifying your center. He says, so he goes through and he talks about all the centers, and he says, but where do you stand? What is the center of your own life? Sometimes that's easy to see, right? Perhaps the best way to identify your own center is to look closely at your life support factors: security, guidance, wisdom, and power. If you can identify with one or more of the descriptions below, you can trace it back to the center from which it flows. Let's see. Okay. A center which may be limiting your personal effectiveness. Oof, gosh, that's so freaking powerful. If you can identify with one or more of the descriptions below, you can trace it back to the center from which it flows, a center which may be limiting your personal effectiveness. We're going to see what he's talking about here in just a second. More often than not, a person's center is some combination of these and or other centers. Most people, so we're not all one center. Like, I'm not only spouse-centered and not church-centered. I might be holistically church-centered, and by virtue of that, maybe a little spouse-centered, and then maybe even a tiny bit principle-centered, but it's all a spectrum, and the idea is to align every aspect of our life and our basic paradigms and beliefs with a principle center, a truth center. More often than not, a person's life is some combination of these and or other centers. Most people are very much a function of a variety of influences that play upon their lives. Depending on external or internal conditions, one particular center may be activated until the underlying needs are satisfied. Then another center becomes the compelling force. Oh, that's interesting. Why have I never caught that before? I've never, in all of the times I've read this, I don't ever remember reading that. Fascinating how that must mean it has some application to me right now that I really need to pay attention to. Center may be activated. Okay, so what is he saying here? A person's center is some combination of these. Okay, cool. I think my center is probably some combination of them, of the alternative centers, or even maybe with principal center too, right? Hopefully an attempt to. At least I feel that an honest attempt to. Most people are very much a function of a variety of influences that play upon their lives. Okay, got it. Depending on external or internal conditions, one particular center may be activated until the underlying needs are satisfied. Then another center becomes the compelling force. As a person fluctuates from one center to another, the resulting relativism is like roller coasting through life. Ooh, that is interesting. Okay, so as you oscillate between the centers as they satisfy or don't satisfy you, family-centeredness too, maybe that doesn't fulfill you, or maybe it does fulfill you, and now you're spouse-centered, now you're pleasure-centered, and now you worked really hard in your career, so then you become pleasure-centered because now you deserve it, right? One moment you're high, the next moment you're low, making efforts to compensate for one weakness by borrowing strength from another weakness. Gosh dang it, that's so freaking good. There is no consistent sense of direction, no persistent wisdom, no steady power, supply, or sense of personal intrinsic worth and identity. The ideal, of course, is to create one clear center from which you consistently derive a high degree of security, guidance, wisdom, and power, empowering you and your personal proactivity and giving congruency and harmony to every aspect of your life. That's interesting. So you won't be oscillating between these centers like living, according to the waves of the sea or by every wind of circumstance. If you can put your life in line with a center that fulfills those things fundamentally. So I'm gonna see if I can zoom in here on this guy a little bit, because it's gonna be important for us to see a little bit more of this. Of course that disappeared, right? I just want to actually try to zoom in a little bit more on here. Okay, so let's look at this just a tiny bit more closely. I think this is going to be powerful. Spouse-centered. Okay, so these are the different types of centers that we could derive, and he's going to show us how each of these centers you would derive security, guidance, wisdom, and power. I wish I would have done this more thoroughly before in my previous studies, because one thing that I've realized as I've been doing this part of the book in the last couple episodes is what that actually means: security, guidance, wisdom, and power. When you just repeat those out and throw them out into the ether, it's hard to understand what they actually might mean, So I've been thinking about that a ton. Okay, so if you're spouse-centered, what does that mean? Your feelings of security are based on the way your spouse treats you. Okay, so this is how you derive your security from being a spouse-centered. Or think about this maybe in an intimate relationship center. You're highly vulnerable to the moods and feelings of your spouse. There's deep disappointment resulting in withdrawal or conflict from your spouse when your spouse disagrees with you and does not meet your expectations. Anytime that may impinge on your relationship is perceived as a threat. Okay, that's what it would look like if you derived your security from the spouse center. What if you derived your guidance from the spouse center? Your direction comes from your own needs and wants, and from those of your spouse. Interesting. Your decision-making criterion is limited to what you think is best for your marriage or for your mate, or to the preferences and opinions of your spouse. So that's how your decision-making process runs, is preferences, opinions of you and your spouse, or what you think is best for your marriage. Your wisdom would come from your life perspective surrounds around things that may positively or negatively influence your spouse or your relationship. And then your power is to act your power to act is limited by weakness in your spouse and yourself. That's interesting because it's like, while you might derive great power from wanting to do things in the name of blessing your spouse, if you're solely spouse-centered, then your ability to go do hard things is going to be limited by how your spouse feels, and specifically how your spouse feels about you. You ever gotten in a fight with a loved one, with your wife or with a boyfriend or girlfriend, husband, and then said to yourself, like, I don't even want to go out and work today, because why would I go out and work for that person if they're gonna treat me like this? It might be I've may or may not have said that in the past. That might be a symptom of a spouse center. If you're family centered, your security is founded on the family's acceptance of fulfilling family expectations. Interesting. Your sense of personal security is as volatile as the family. So your feelings of self-worth are based on the family's reputation. Interesting. Family scripting. So if you derive guidance from your family center, family scripting is your source of correct attitudes and behaviors. It's just this is how we do things in our family. My dad made decisions this way, etc. Your decision-making criterion is good for the family, or what the family members want. Wisdom. You interpret all of your life in terms of your family, creating a particular understanding in family narcissism. That's kind of fascinating. I've definitely known families like this before. Your actions are limited by family models and traditions. That's true. Okay, the only other ones I want to focus on right now is because you could go over all of these, but like listening on audio, it could get a tiny bit boring. But you should go to read this part of the book where he talks about the different centers, and how specifically you would derive security, guidance, wisdom, and power from each of these centers. I think it's a very, very interesting study. But I do want to talk about money-centered a little bit, because like in our industry and where I work, and you guys that work with me, like, you know this, that there are so many people who are money-centered. But there are also a ton of people who are possession-centered, who are pleasure-centered. There's even ones that are work-centered, for sure, obviously. And I would argue maybe self-centered too. Maybe we'll go over more of these. Okay, so if you're money-centered, tell me if this doesn't ring true to you guys that work with me and are in freaking direct door-to-door sales, cold calling. If this doesn't ring true to you, to anyone ever that you've seen do this job that is like not principle-centered. Your personal worth is determined by your net worth, or how much money you made in the sales season. You're vulnerable to anything that threatens your economic security. Profit is your decision-making criterion. How much money am I going to make? Not what's best for my customer, not what's best for me. Oh crap, I'm not even sharing this part with you guys. Check it out. Here we are. I'll zoom in on this a little bit. You see that? Okay, there we go. So your profit is your decision-making criterion. Money-making is the lens through which you view life, and seen as understood, creating imbalanced judgment. So like, all the decisions that you make is through like how much money you will make. It's going to imbalance my judgment pretty hardcore if that's the case. You're restricted. The power comes from you're restricted to what you can accomplish with your money and your limited vision. So I know people who are money-centered who don't make all that much money, actually, but because it restricts and dictates everything in their life and their feelings about themselves. Kind of interesting thought there too. Let's go with possession-centered here for a second. I think that one's kind of really fascinating, actually. So your security is based on your reputation. Okay, so reputation, your social status, or the tangible things you possess. You tend to compare what you have to what others have. Fascinating. You know any like recruiters for sales programs that are that way? The Ferraris, the cars, whatever, right? I have a decently nice car. I really enjoy my car, especially because they freaking just uploaded full self-driving to that bad boy, and it like drives me to work. And I just got back. I just got back about 30 minutes a day, just in drive time, to from office and work. No, I just got back 40 minutes a day in effectiveness in drive time, to from office and work, so that I could be more efficient with things and focus more in effectiveness with people. I'm pumped about that, but I'm not going around and trying to make it so that my worth is based off of the car that I drive. And I think that that's actually dangerous. In fact, I want to tell you a quick story about possession centeredness. So like when then now I'm going to circle back to bragging about the car, and I don't mean it to be that, I promise, but I drive a Tesla Model S. It's the fastest Model S that was ever produced before the Plaid. And I keep wanting to trade in the Plaid. I could totally go do it and have it delivered at my house by the time I get home from Ecuador. But I don't want to do that because I do not want to risk becoming possession centered by just doing things based off of having a different possession, especially now. And now as I really think about it logically, I'm like, why would I do that if my car already has full self-driving anyway? So besides the point. But when I took delivery of my car about a year ago, this mentor that I refer to, Jason Walton, was there. You guys know him. He was at the Dallas office because I was living in Dallas. I had a property there. I had a house there, a house in Utah, and I was kind of splitting time. And we were about to move back more full-time to Utah. And so I take delivery of my Tesla Model S. And I had it wrapped, right? So like, it was kind of cool how this happened because I was also out of the country at the time. And I called my buddy who has done wraps on my cars in the past, and I was like, hey, Brett, can you go pick up my car? You're going to be the first person to drive my Model S. I'm super jealous, but I'll go unlock it for you. Will you pick it up? I'll pay for your Uber. Go pick it up from my house. Drive it back to your shop and wrap it for me so that I can have it wrapped by the time I get home. So we designed this like sick wrap, right? Like I'm so pumped about it. It's super stealthy. It's not really like out there so that it looks weird, but it's like, I think it's dope. It's like a pearl white Avery satin wrap. And we painted the brake calipers blue so that they were still classy, but like sick. And then we painted the wheels black, like this more gloss black. And then we painted the 8-pillar black too, tinted it out so that it was just like this awesome like looking car, right? I'm so pumped about this possession that I have. And up until that point, I had been driving a very crappy car. My wife and I only had bought our Camry because our other car died. That was a 1999 Mazda Protege. And so, anyway, point is, I hadn't had a possession like that in a while. I'd had other cool cars in the past, but not. It had been a minute. So I take delivery. So when I get home, right, Jason Walton is visiting our Dallas branch, and he's the CEO, founder of the company. So he's an amazing individual, incredible mentor. He's visiting the branch. He's talking with us. We have some meetings that day, and I pull up in my car, and Jason is teasing me, and he's like, "Well, Hayden, it doesn't get much better than this." And I'm like, "What? 27? I'm a 27-year-old who had just bought the fastest car you could possibly buy." Literally, like, not many cars faster than the car that I had just purchased, and at least 0 to 16. So Jason's giving me a hard time about it. He's like, "Oh, I'll let you in on a secret, Hayden. It doesn't get better than this unless you just upgrade every time." But later on that day, he pulled me aside, and he was like, "Hayden, like, congratulations, you're starting to have some success. Like, I'm happy for you. You're doing a great job." And I said, "Thanks, Jason. I was like, I'd be curious, like, do you have any advice for me though, as like in these times?" And I started picking his brain on some advice, and he's like, "Yeah, can I give you an insight actually that I thought today when I saw you drive up in that car?" And I actually had it parked out the window, like directly over his shoulder. So I'm in the conference room and I'm looking over his shoulder out the window, and my car's parked there in the back. And he points behind him like this and he goes, "You just added something to your life that most people would allow to take up large real estate in their, not only their mind, but in their personal, spiritual, and emotional life. And most people would start to focus their center on things like that because now you can actually afford those things, you know." And what he didn't know is that I could afford them for a while, but I had just been holding off. But he's like, now that you've decided to make decisions to where you're purchasing things like that, and you have real estate and other things, and things are going well in the company, and you're growing, you're part of the business and all this stuff. He's like, now that you are doing that effectively, you know, and then he went on this tangent. He was like, when I was a kid, all I wanted was to make money and have wealth. And he's like, I know what situation you grew up in, and like I know that's the case for you as well. He's like, but what's interesting is like it's very deceptive because you think that that's all that you want, but that what you don't realize is that all money actually does is it just gives you more options. And so the quickest way to damn yourself to hell is to give yourself more options that are bad, or that give yourself more options to do things that are not in line with a principle center, with your covenants, with your beliefs, with your relationship with God. And that's the quickest way to damn yourself to hell, is to now have more options and to not choose God, not choose the very things that got you there, which is Him. Not choose the very things that got you. And if you don't believe in God, not choose the very things that got you there, which are living on truth and aligning your life with truth and delivering value, because that's what gets you money if you do it right, is just delivering value in people's lives at a massive level, right? And so then he kept talking about this, and he was like, so my question to you, Hayden, if you're asking me for advice, I'll give you advice. Here's my question for you. And I was like, okay, thanks, shoot for it, Jason. He goes, and I'll never forget this. I'll never forget the feeling of the room. I'll never forget the temperature of the air on my skin. I'll never forget the polo that he was, wearing, where I was standing, what I was wearing, the situation, the light shining through the curtains or through the blinds behind us as I was looking out those open blinds to see my car in the background over his shoulder. How casually he was sitting there just throwing these ideas, tossing them into my mind, like Napoleon Hill says. He goes, let me ask you a question, Hayden. So my question would be, you just added this to that thing to your life. It will now occupy space in your life. What other things are you going to make sure to add that will occupy space that are much more important than that thing? And how can you make it so that that thing never occupies, and things in general never occupy more space in your life than things that truly matter most? Because what you'll realize is that like those things, that thing behind me right here, that doesn't have to occupy any space, but that it will only be true. You will only actually have fulfillment and live a life according to true principles while being able to afford those types of things or do good with money if you put first things first, if you put God first, if you put your truth first, if you put principles first, if you put service to others first. Otherwise, as Covey says, and he didn't say this specifically, but otherwise you'll spend your whole life chopping down the jungle and building the most amazing mansion, realizing that you were in the wrong jungle, or that you were on the wrong island, or that you were in the wrong hemisphere. So, and that last part is more of my interpretation of kind of what he was saying. But anyway, so like I'm not going to go back and read these words about what it means to be possession-centered, or even riff on how I think like most people in industries where they're highly lucrative have the risk of becoming money-centered, work-centered, possession-centered, even pleasure-centered at the end of it. Typically people who don't make a ton of money, they're more like along the lines of spouse-centered, family-centered. They tend to be, I would say, from my observations, pleasure-centered, to escape the work, typically, friend-centered, and church-centered. But the truth is, though, that being principle-centered actually gives context and meaning. You might make the same decisions as if you were in any one of the other centers, but it gives context and meaning to the experience as a whole of your life, and true meaning and happiness and joy and peace in it. So that's all we're going to have time for today. If you guys are watching this and you liked some of this stuff, if you're tuning in for the first time, what I would suggest is going back and starting starting from when I started this series, and learn along the way with me. Have your book open as you're reading it. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, or not, just listen. It's basically like me reading Stephen Covey's words and just giving my own commentary on what I'm learning and what I have learned. And so for that, little brain Hayden can team up with big brain Stephen, and I think that there's like some cool learnings to be had there. But I just appreciate you guys watching and paying attention or listening. Make sure you comment the things that you're learning. Subscribe. Talon, dude, thanks for sending me your comments. Send me more of those. If you guys want to send me those personally, awesome. I'd love to see them. If you want to send them, I would actually prefer if you put them in the comments, though, of the videos. Or like Talon, you were listening on Apple Podcasts. That's awesome. Just send me them, and I'll highly. If you don't mind, I might actually screenshot them and put them on my Instagram. But I just appreciate you guys doing that, and I'll feature you on my Instagram if you send it to me personally. And tell me not to say your name if you don't want me to. But thanks, guys. I freaking love you. Grateful for everybody that's watching and listening and following along, and more grateful if you're actually applying it to your own lives, because that's actually, I think, why this is so important, what it can do. And I'll see you guys on the next episode.